But one day, before we moved up here, our Aunt Lena had been out in the side yard working, stringing beans. Uncle Emery had been out in the back field hoeing weeds out of the garden. Well, he come into the side yard where Aunt Lena had been working, and before she knew what happened, he took his shotgun and killed her dad. Nobody knows why he done it. Then he went and rested up against the apple tree. Put the end of the gun to his mouth and pulled the trigger. I don't know how we got word of it, but we got up here before the sheriff did, and there they were, both were just laid out on the ground. And I just remember how quiet and still it was. No birds a singing, no breeze a blowing, no nothing. Well, some time went by, and somehow or another the county got the hold of the old place. Back taxes, I reckon. They put it up for auction. And I'm proud to tell you that our mommy and daddy bought it. Was that a grisly scene to get over? Well, you better know that it was, but this little spot up on the mountain, why that it was and still is heaven on earth. Well, from the highest point up here, where you can see ridge top after ridge top after ridge top, well, you can see pretty near into 3 states. But the best part of all is where we live with our mama and daddy. And you know, a lot of our music come from right out of these hills. Well, you just walk around up here sometime and study on the words to some of my songs. Well, you can just about see it in your mind. In the deep rolling hills of old Virginia, there's a place I love so well, where I spent many days of my childhood, in the cabin where we loved to dwell. A song like that, The White Dove, that's the backbone of my music right there. White doves will mourn in sorrow, the willows will hang their head. I'll live my life in sorrow, since mother and daddy are dead. You know, that's one of the first songs I ever tried to write. Made it up out of my own head and had enough wood left over to build a fire with. No, really, I remember very well the night that I wrote The White Dove. We'd been down to a show date in Asheville, North Carolina, and after the program, well, we was in the car headed back to Bristol, Virginia, where we was the headquarters at the time. Of course, it was dark, late at night. Nobody saying much of anything to one another. Well, little brother Ralph was in the front seat of driving, and well, I was in the back seat with the light on so I could see to write the words down. Ralph was fussing at me for having the light on, said it bothered his driving. He hasn't fussed about that anymore. As the years roll by, I often wonder, will we all be together someday? And each night as I wander to the graveyard, darkness finds me where I kneel to pray. You know, I always kindly dreaded the day when, according to nature, we'd have to say goodbye to our mom and our daddy. I had to face that day back when Well, back when Dad passed away. Of course, that was the second time, really, that he left us. Where did he go the first time? I don't know. I just know he wasn't here on the ridge with me and Ma and Ralph. Seemed like maybe he went off to Texas for a while, and it wasn't long after that I graduated high school, joined the Army. World War II, you know. And they sent me out to Arizona, of all places. And I don't know if I was with him, but he was with me, you know. And I would remember things that he had told me. Well, him and Ma both. They'd tell us, "Son, don't go astray," was what they both told me. Remember that love for God can be found. But now they're both gone. This letter just told me. For years they've been dead. The fields have turned brown. For years they've been dead. The fields have turned brown. You know, by the time me and Ralph come along, well, neither one of our mom nor our daddy was what you might call spring chickens. Well, by the time I was a young teenager, they was both pushing 60. I was looking at a picture of us the other day. Must have been made not long after me and Ralph got our instruments and started learning to pick and sing a little bit. Oh, there I was down on the end, all thin and wiry and kind of proud looking. I was wearing my daddy's hat. Down on the other end with little toe-headed Ralph standing there all prim and proper and had his shirt buttoned all the way to the top. In between the two of us was our Ma and our daddy. Ma's hair was pretty much all silver by then. She wore it nice and neat, pulled back in a bun at the back of her head. And she had on this real pretty print dress, went way down below her knees. And our daddy was all dressed up in dress slacks and a shirt and tie, but he had kind of a careworn look about him. And I don't guess I ever much thought about it at the time, but, well, you know, some of our first taste of music come from them too, right there. Well, Ma was one of 12 young'uns, and every one of them could play the old drop thumb style of banjo picking. Oh, back in her younger days, Ma used to take the banjo and travel around to different folks' houses where they would take all the furniture out of the family room and roll up the carpet, and they would make music and dance until the break of day. Old Ma was something else. Now our daddy, now he couldn't do a thing as far as an instrument goes, but his voice was just the same as ours is. I guess that's where we got what little singing we know. And lots of times of a night when me and Ralph would be at the back of the house drifting off to sleep, well, we'd hear him out on the front porch letting loose on some of the old ballads. Well, like The Man of Constant Sorrow, Oh Me Wise, The Story of the Brown Girl. And sometimes of a night our uncle, Jim Henry Stanley, would come over and join in with him. Oh, the two of them, they would make songs until way up into the night. And then of a Sunday morning, why, the two of them would lead the hymn singing at the McClure Church. I got a lot of respect for folks like that. Old-timers, I guess you'd call them. And you know, we even had a few old-timers to work with us back when we was first getting our program off the ground. I run into one of them not long ago. We done a show date over in Tennessee, and I spotted one of them out there in the audience. I said, "Why, there is Tom Ashley." Oh, I had him to stand up and show himself off to everybody, and oh, he was looking mighty sharp too. Had that white shirt all starched and pressed, and that John B. Stetson hat, and oh, he looked like a million. I bet he didn't have two nickels to rub together, but he looked like a million. And old Tom's a pretty fair guitar and banjo man. Is today and was years ago. Used to make his living traveling around with these medicine shows. Oh, they would travel around from town to town and set up shop in the middle of town or in front of the courthouse. And well, to get them a crowd gathered around, they'd make them some music. And then to keep the folks entertained, they would launch into some of these old worn out vaudeville routines, I think is what they was. And after Tom got to traveling around with us, riding around in the car from one show date to another, he'd start going over some of these old deals. Started out doing him by himself, and the next thing you know, he had us a-working on them. Wasn't long after that till we was doing them on our program. Well, there was the one about the book salesman and over the River Charlie. Old Tom was something else. And about the time me and Ralph come along, a lot of these old-timers, like Tom, well, they kind of felt like life had passed them by. And I always felt bad about that. Well, you know, in a lot of ways, it's just like the old horse. If he's made you a good living or paved the way for you in some manner, why, well, when he gets too old to work, don't shoot him. Put him out the pasture and let him rest a while. Let him graze. Let him enjoy what time he's got left. And that's the way it was with Fiddlin' Powers. Now, I first met him back in 1946. There I was, fresh out of the Army, working over in Northern Virginia with Roy Sykes and the Blue Ridge Mountain Boys. And Fiddlin' Powers used to come visit with us to the radio station. Oh, we'd let him play a tune or two on the program, and when it was over, we'd sit around the studio and swap stories and one thing and another. And like out of the 5 or 6 of us in the group, that I was about the youngest, and it seemed like I was about the only one that had any time for the old man. I made a friendship there that lasted until he died. But before all that went down, when me and Ralph was first getting started, Fiddlin' Powers got the word he'd come visit with us. Started out staying 2 or 3 days, and got the word he'd stay 2 or 3 weeks. Went where we went, did what we did. I think a man might be rewarded for, well, what would you call something like that? A good deed or something? I remember the last show he ever worked with us. 1953, I believe it was. We done a show date over in Glade Spring, Virginia, to the Summit Drive-In Theater. And in a lot of these drive-in deals we used to do, they wouldn't hardly ever have a stage set up for us to put our program on with. Oh, they might have a flatbed trailer or something set up in front of the movie screen, or lots of times they'd have us to put our program on up on top of the concession stand where they sold peanuts and popcorn and soda pop. And well, if it was a real nice place, they'd even have a set of steps built for us to get up to the top. Most times, I think they just had a ladder thrown up against the side of the building. I believe that's the way it was at the Summit. Well, anyway, there we was up on top of the concession stand, putting on our program, floodlights blaring up at us, and bugs flying around trying to get in their mouths and one thing and another. And well, it's come time for Fiddlin' Powers to do his little part of the program. Oh, we helped the old man up the stage and got him situated at the microphone. And well, Fiddlin' Powers, why don't you tell the folks what it is you're going to do for him here this evening? Well, that's right. Go right ahead. Now, he played his usual tune. Played it as good or better than I think I ever heard him play it. When he was done, he made his way off the stage and back down to the car. And we closed the program out not long after that. By the time we got down to the stage, why, he was in awful pain in his chest. I had a good idea what it was, but well, we told him different, you know. We tried to cheer him up. We took him to the local hospital and stayed with him and got situated until, hey, Doc, the old man fiddling powers. How is he? I see. If you could make him as comfortable as you can, I'd appreciate it. He said if we know any of his immediate family, we'd better have them to get over there as quick as they can. Now, he passed away about 10 or 11 o'clock the next morning, and we sang at his funeral. And you know, we've had a lot of requests over the years to sing at funerals, which we have done, but that's the only time we ever stood right at the graveside and took the instruments out of the cases and picked and sang. That was the way he wanted it. That was the last request for fiddling powers. My latest son is sinking fast. My race is nearly run. My strongest trials now are past. My triumph has begun. Oh, come, angel band, come and around me stand. Bear me away on your snowy wing to my immortal home. Bear me away on your snowy wing to my immortal home. Sure do miss the old man. You know, over the years we have a lot of people come up to us and ask us about our music. Where does it come from? I don't rightly know what to tell them. And a lot of the same folks that ask us about our music, well, they'll tell us, they say that our music has the sound of the ages, the lonesomeness of the mountains. Me, I always just thought of it as a gift. Oh, I don't know, it's a lot of things, I guess. Well, you know, some of the first music we ever heard was back when we was little boys, going to the McClure Primitive Baptist Church. Well, that's right. Come on in here. I want you folks to see this. I want you folks to hear this. Now, I don't know how much all of you folks know about the little Baptist churches we have down here in the mountains, but a lot of them, they don't allow any musical instruments in the church. No guitars, pianos, organs, just the human voice. Why that is, I don't know. Some sort of tradition, I guess. But they'll have a singer or song leader to get up in front of the congregation and lead the whole flock of people through a song, through a hymn, one line at a time. In fact, that's what we call that kind of singing, lining out. Well, somebody might start off with something like, Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. And then the congregation would follow right along behind it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. And back to the song leader. that saved a wretch like me, that saved, and well, so on and so forth. And a lot of these singers and song leaders, oh, they have such a lyrical way about their singing. And even their talking too, same way. Lyrical. Oh, you could almost taste the smell of wood smoke in them voices. So I'd say that's a little bit of what our music's rooted in. Over the years, we take some of the old songs from the Baptist hymnal and we kind of bluegrass them up a little bit. Speed them up and put some music and harmony behind them. And well, songs like Little Bessie, Come All Ye Tender-Hearted. Folks seem to like that. And you know, growing up in the church like that, well, I like to think I turned out what folks today might call spiritual. Oh, I'd read and study on all this stuff, and well, I'd write songs about it. I surely would. But as much as I would read and study on all this stuff and write songs about it, I have an independent streak about me. I like to kick back and rebel every now and again. Oh, I remember one time we was coming back from a show date somewhere. Oh, it was dark, late at night, and there was a storm coming up. Pretty bad one too, lots of thunder and lightning, and the old boy that was driving the car for us that night, oh, it had him shook up pretty bad. It didn't bother me any. I just rolled down the car window, stuck my fist up in the air and hollered, "You think you could get me? Come on! Ha 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 ha! There ain't nobody or no thing gets the better of Carter Stanley." And that's the way it was when I took my first drink. Oh, just like religion was growing up, it was all around us. And we had an uncle that made some of the finest moonshine whiskey around. Well, after we got to traveling the roads, going to show dates and one thing and another, about that any time we'd be driving the car off the ridge, I'd have him to stop and pull the car over so I could get me some of what we called Dewey's finest. And it was, too. If the ocean was a whiskey and I was a duck, I'd dive to the bottom and never come up. Of course, when you're a young buck, feeling invincible, well, drink every now and again, especially on a Saturday night, but that don't hurt nothing. Later on, you get to traveling the roads, away from home. A dose or two, I call it my medicine. That just helps the miles to go by a little easier, and there's nothing wrong with that. A shot or two before you put you on a program, that just steadies your nerves. It puts your mind at ease. Well, you all know what I'm talking about. Or do you? On bended knees, I prayed a prayer that God would save and protect us there. Let whiskey stay as far from me as the mountain is from the deep blue sea. Come listen to the story about a man named Jed. Poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. Oh, I guess a lot of you folks are familiar with that little jingle. Theme song to one of the most popular television programs that go in these days. And I just want to tell you folks right off the bat, we didn't have a thing in the world to do with it. No, really. Some old boys by the name of Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs come up with the music for that. And as soon as folks got to watching the program every week and hearing the song and liking it so much, well, the boys got them an idea to go in the studio and make them a record of it. As soon as it come out and hit the airwaves, well, it shot straight to the top of the charts. #1 with the bullet, they like to say. It seemed like just about everything them two boys got into in the music business turned out for them that way. Well, they stars of the Grand Ole Opry, had them a weekly television program, a national sponsor, some flower company out of Nashville. Paid them a weekly salary whether they worked or not. And I don't mean to sound petty, but frankly, them two boys were a thorn in my side right from the start. Oh, the first time we ever heard of them, they was playing on the Grand Ole Opry with Bill Monroe. I believe in giving the devil his dues. Lester Flatt is one of the smoothest singers to come down the pike. Him and Bill Monroe, oh, they had him a mighty powerful duet. And Earl Scruggs, he was a setting the woods on fire with that fancy banjo picking of his. Well, before Scruggs come along, nobody had ever heard of that kind of picking before. And about the time that all this was going on, that's when the Stanley brothers started making a name for themselves. Well, over in Bristol, Virginia, 6 days a week on radio station WCYB, folks all over western North Carolina, East Tennessee, eastern Kentucky, Southwest Virginia, they got to knowing the music of the Stanley brothers. And we own that part of the country as far as old-time hillbilly music went. And that's right about the time the trouble started. Well, Flatt and Scruggs, they got tired of beating the roads all the time with Bill Monroe, working 6 and 7 nights a week, sleeping every night in the back seat of a car, hardly never having a chance to take their shoes and socks off but about once a week. So they turned their notice into Bill Monroe. But they hadn't been gone from him but about a week till they got him an idea to make him a group of their own. Lester Flatt, Earl Scruggs, and the Foggy Mountain Boys. And one of the first places they decided to settle, Bristol, Virginia. Well, that wouldn't have been so bad, but me and Ralph was out on the streets of Bristol one day. We run into Lester Flatt. Oh, we exchanged how-do-you-do's with him and one thing and another, and hadn't been talking with him for too long till he started to take us to task about some of the songs we liked to sing. Ones we'd heard by Bill Monroe on the Grand Ole Opry. Old Lester told us if anybody had a right to sing him, it was him, because he was the one that was working with Bill when all them songs was made popular. Well, the next thing you know, he's bad-mouthing around. Now, he can talk about me all he wants. When he goes to running down my little brother, I just had to pop him. Things never was much better after that. Oh, except for Flatt and Scruggs, that is. Oh, I told you all that other stuff about them, the Opry, the TV show, the sponsor. Well, the next thing you know, Time magazine comes along, does a big article about the boys, makes it sound like Flatt and Scruggs come up with this music all by themselves. No mention at all of Bill Monroe, much less the Stanley brothers. But the thing that got my goat, they put the damn salary right there in the article. Said that after expenses, each one of the boys cleared $100,000 apiece. Hell, we's lucky if our whole group cleared $100,000 before expenses. And not that I wanted to see the boys do bad, but there should have been enough of the pie to go around for everybody. Oh, I would think about that stuff all the time. We have a good friend by the name of Bill Clifton. He's awful good to us. Helps us out when he can. Lets me call him up, bounce ideas off of him, daytime, nighttime. Well, time of day don't seem to matter much when things are weighing on your mind. Hey, Bill, Carter, listen, I've got it. I know how we can be popular, just like Flatt and Scruggs. That's right. I'm going to learn Ralph to pick the banjo, just like Earl Scruggs. I said, why would we want to do that? Said Ralph's banjo picking's one of the things that makes us special, makes us unique. Hey, Bill, Carter, listen, I've got it. I know how we can be popular like Flatt and Scruggs. That's right. I got a line on a used bus, just like the one Flatt and Scruggs travels around, and going to fix it up real nice, get our names painted on the side of it, Stanley Brothers and the Clinch Mountain Boys, and oh, it's a dandy. You ought to see it. Say, Bill, we need a couple thousand to put down on it to seal the deal. Can you help us out? I believe at the time that Bill was just about as broke as we was. We never did get us a bus. Most times it was just three of us going out to make show dates anyway, me and Ralph and our guitar picker, George Shuffler. And you know, back when we was all starting out picking and singing this kind of music, well, there wasn't that many folks interested in it. And we was all scrapping after every audience member we could get. Kind of a turf war, I guess you might say. And it made for some hard feelings between some of the groups. And, well, as you can tell, we was at the top of the list there. But after about 15 or 20 years of it, I was getting kind of tired of it. I wanted to make my peace with Flatt and Scruggs. I wanted to tell him how this stuff had been weighing on my mind and bothering my conscience. Well, we ran into Lester at a show date somewhere, and I went up to him and wanted to tell him how this stuff had been weighing on my mind and bothering my conscience. Well, Lester just stood there looking at me. And you know, he come from way over in Tennessee, where they don't believe in saying anything in a hurry. And he let it out in this long, slow Tennessee drawl, said, Carter, said, you don't have a conscience. And then he just turned and walked away. I don't suppose I ever did make much sense out of all that stuff that went on between us. I did hear it through the grapevine once that Flatt and Scruggs said about us, said we got them beat on the picking, talking about us. Said we can't touch them on the singing. So I don't know, I guess that's a compliment. And the folks that's all the time reading and studying on this kind of music and writing articles in the magazine, they's all the time talking about the big three. Bill Monroe, Flatt and Scruggs, and the Stanley Brothers. So we're right in there with them, I guess. Well, somebody once told me that success is the best revenge. I think you can measure success in different ways, although the money would have been nice. But I think the music, our music, my music, it'll be around for a long, long time to come. That will be my success. Well, now it's time to say goodbye to Jed and all his kin. They would like to thank you folks for kindly dropping in. Well, talking about some of the other folks, like we were there a minute ago, I guess, I guess a lot of you folks are familiar with Elvis Presley. Him and all that. How does he do that? You know, it used to be before Elvis and all those cats come along that a couple of boys with the banjo and the guitar could play them a few tunes and make them a little money. After Elvis and that crowd come along, well, it was scramble time, and folks like us that like this old-timey hillbilly kicking and singing, well, we had to scramble and do whatever we could to play a few tunes and make a little money. Well, some of the boys that worked at the radio station where we did, they had groups of their own, and they come up with these ideas of how to go head-to-head with Elvis Presley. One of the boys had him a group. He decided he was going to add drums to his outfit. Drums in a hillbilly band. Another old boy had him a group. He decided he was going to make him up a package show, something that was a little different than just another run-of-the-mill hillbilly music outfit. So he hooked up with this boy by the name of Suicide Jones. They would go out and make show dates together, and they'd start off with a little music, and about halfway through the music, well, they would stop it, just shut it down. And the next thing you know, these 2 or 3 old boys come trotting out carrying this great big heavy wooden box. Had a sheet of steel about that thick in the bottom of it, and they laid it out right smack dab in the middle of the midway of the ball field, wherever they happened to be. And the next person to come out was Suicide Jones. But he strutted himself right up to the box and laid himself out right smack dab in the middle of it. And the last person to come out was this old boy carrying a big old stick of dynamite. Well, he walked up to the box, shoved it under, and lit the fuse, and the next thing you know, come on! Now that would draw a crowd. But we never did do anything like that, or not quite like that anyway. Although a couple of times we did make up some package shows of our own, usually with other musical types of entertainers. Well, I remember one time we had direct from the Grand Ole Opry, Mother Maybelle and the Carter Sisters. Come down, spent the week with us, traveled around our part of the country here, playing high school auditoriums and theaters and the like. And another time, also from the Grand Ole Opry, Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. Same deal, come down, spent the week with us. But there was one time we hooked up with another type of entertainer. We hooked up with a movie star. We sure did, Al St. John. Well, a lot of people knew him as Fuzzy Q. Jones. Well, he made movies for 40 years, mostly as a sidekick in a lot of these low-budget Western movies. Kind of like Gabby Hayes, a little short fella scrunched up with a beard and talked real funny. And well, that was Fuzzy. And right about the time that Fuzzy's film career kind of tapered off, he made him a living traveling around with these Wild West shows where they would do trick horseback riding and roping and shooting and one thing and another. And that's what Fuzzy was doing the week that he hooked up with us. And to let folks know where that it was that they could see Fuzzy with the Stanley Brothers, we trotted him down to the TV station where we had a program on the air 2 or 3 days a week. And we were showing Fuzzy all around the studio, and a brand new one too. Hadn't been on the air but about 6 months or so. Had brand new #1 equipment right down the line, and the little area that they had set aside for us to do our program with, well, they would use it for different things throughout the day. Maybe if one of the ladies had them a cooking show or something, well, they would have a backdrop at the back of the set of, well, something that looked like a kitchen. Maybe if some of the boys had them a sports program or something, they had a backdrop for them, a ball field, football, baseball, whatever time of year it happened to be. And for our program, I believe they had a backdrop for us, and had some mountains way off in the background, and a big old country lake right there in the middle, and well, just a real pretty scene where you might expect to find a couple of boys with the banjo and guitar. And off to the side, they had this big pole running up and down, and hanging off of it with this big boom thing, and Right about where it ended was a microphone hanging down to pick up all our talking and picking and singing and one thing and another. And we had just about finished showing all this to Fuzzy when the program director come over to ask us about our program, how it was going to flow for the day. Well, we told him we'd start off with our theme song, do 2 or 3 numbers. We'd bring Fuzzy out and introduce him to all the people in TV land, tell them where they could see Fuzzy with the Stanley brothers, and we'd let him do 2 or 3 of his cowboy deals, and we'd come back and do 2 or 3 more songs and close it out, and that would be the program. Well, the program director studied Fuzzy up one side and down the other. And Fuzzy was really decked out for the part, too. Had on his leather cowboy boots and spurs and denim breeches and leather chaps, and around his waist he had a big, thick leather belt and a round metal belt buckle with a longhorn steer stamped in the middle of it, and a denim shirt and a leather vest, and coiled up and slung over his shoulder was a great long piece of rope and a 10-gallon hat, and hanging off to the side he had a holster with a 6-shooter in it. Now that really got the attention of the program director. He asked Fuzzy, he says, are you going to fire the gun? Well, yeah, I'm going to fire the gun. I got it loaded with blanks. Well, if you could give us a moment's notice before you fire the gun, that would be nice. So we signed on with our theme song. We did 2 or 3 numbers, brought Fuzzy out, introduced him to all the people in TV land, told them where they could see Fuzzy, and then we turned it over and let Fuzzy do 2 or 3 of his cowboy deals. And the first one he had was, he had this deal where he could take and roll a cigarette in one hand. Put his hand out there like that. He had him a strip of rolling paper and a big gum of tobacco, and of course, the cameraman at the station, he got him a close-up of Fuzzy's hand with all this business in it, and he did something like that with his fingers, and when he was done, darned if he didn't do it. He rolled him a cigarette in one hand, darndest thing I ever saw. Well, then he went on and did a couple of rope tricks and one thing and another, and then I asked him about the gun. Now, Fuzzy was smooth, and I'm sure he had done this 1,000 times before. He had his hand out here to the side like this, and nice and slow, all in one motion. He came up the side, and on the way up, he yanked the gun out of the holster, and up above his head, right next to the microphone, he fired the gun. And I'm sure that everybody out in TV land heard it loud and clear. Somebody that heard it even louder, off to the side behind a double-paned set of glass was a sound engineer with a set of headphones on, jumping up and down, mouthing about every curse word in the book. Oh, he wasn't pleased a bit. But that wasn't the worst thing. Old Fuzzy, being all decked out in his cowboy outfit and under the glare of the lights, he was complaining about being hot. He said, "Boys, you wait here. I'm going to cool off and take a dip in that lake at the back of the set." Well, before anybody could say anything, off he charged head first into the lake of the backdrop at the back of the set. But what Fuzzy failed to realize was about 2 inches behind the backdrop was the cement wall. Well, he hadn't any sooner dove into the lake till he dove into the wall, and down he went. And on his way down, he took the backdrop down with him. There he was, laid out on the ground like a prize fighter down for the count. And I believe they cut to a commercial right quick and tried to patch it up as best they could, as quick as they could. And we come back on and did 2 or 3 more numbers, and hadn't any sooner faded to black at the end of the program till the program director come on the set waving his clipboard and yelling at the top of his lungs to get that idiot off the set and never let him on here again. And that was the start of our week with Fuzzy. Now, it just so happened that the week that Fuzzy traveled around with us, we had a big flood down here in this part of the country. And you know, it used to be that a big rainstorm wasn't much of a problem, but over the years, I guess so many of the coal companies and the timber people, well, they just stripped away so much of the trees from the hillsides that come January of '57, when the rains came, well, there just wasn't much to hold the waters back. And we was right here in the middle of it. And we saw a good bit of the destruction. And there wasn't a lot to laugh about. Although later on some of it did strike us as kind of funny. Well, like a lady friend of ours we knew, she didn't have any indoor plumbing. And when the rains came and the water started rising, she made her way out into the yard, battling the elements as best she could, carrying a great big sturdy rope. She made her way across the yard to a big sturdy tree and took the other end of the rope across the yard, still battling the elements, and tied the other end around her outhouse. Well, she went back inside and shook off as best she could, and of course she couldn't help but looking out her kitchen window, checking on the status of her little privy there. And of course the rains kept coming, the waters kept rising, and that old privy's just bobbing around out on the water like nobody's business. Oh, you could see the water push it to the left. It would push it to the right. You could see the tension on the rope just a-coming and a-going. And the next thing you know, away she went. Old Mother Nature sent her on down the line. But there was a lot of people hurting then. Come listen, good people, wherever you are, and hear a sad story you've been waiting for, about the flood of 57 as it happened to be in Kentucky, old Virginia, and East Tennessee. Now, we was lucky that we lived up here on high ground. We didn't lose a thing. But some people lost everything to that flood. Things like that will weigh on your mind. Well, the first night of the flood, before it got to be too bad, we'd been over to Grundy, Virginia to a show at the Morgan Theater. Later that night, as we tried to make our way back to the old home place, the old dirt roads was mighty rough. Finally, I told Ralph, I said, just pull the car off to the side of the road. And we sat there. And I wrote a song about it. Wrote it in about 5 minutes, called it The Flood. Well, but the next night we had it all worked up with the band and everything. And later that night or sometime in the middle of the morning, I called our publisher up in Nashville. Sung it to him right over the phone. He told us to find a studio just as quick as we could, make a tape of it and get it down to him right away, which is what we did. How the rains came down, as we often had seen, to swell a broad river or some little stream. But this one was different, and we soon realized that the floods were raging, and we fought for our lives. But old Fuzzy said, no. He said, that's no good to sing about a tragedy like that. Well, that didn't mean anything to me. I figured I was just about as much an authority on country music as Fuzzy was making cowboy music. And you know what? Here it is, all these years later, we're still getting requests for that song. How we all escaped it, I never will know. It must have been God's will, it was not time to go. By the help of His mercy, some managed to smile and face the disasters as the waters run wild. Well, in case a lot of you folks hasn't figured it out by now, we was raised up on hillbilly music. And to me, That's not a dirty word. But we listened to people like the Carter family, Maynard's Mountaineers, the Monroe brothers. And after Bill and Charlie Monroe kindly split up and went their own separate ways, well, then there was Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. Used to see advertisements for him in our local paper. He would bring his program down around this part of the country. Oh, they billed him as the greatest hillbilly entertainer of them all. And he was, too. And after we got to hearing the kind of music Bill was making with his group, well, we knew right then and there that that was the sound for us. Mandolins and fiddles, guitars and banjos. Them's the kind of instruments we used to make our music. And them's the same kind of instruments we used to make our music. Of course, you know, it's not just the instruments, it's what you do with them. It's the rhythm and the drive and the power and the punch. That's what makes this kind of music. Now, Pee Wee Lambert was a feller that understood all this. Back when we first organized our group back in 1946, well, Pee Wee was an original member of the group. And Pee Wee, his given name was Darrell, but he kind of a short little feller, and somebody hung the name Pee Wee on him. He could play the mandolin and pitch his voice just as high and clear, just like Bill Monroe. You know, before Bill Monroe come along, nobody had hardly ever heard of this kind of music before. Somebody once called it the folk music with overdrive, that all the music just come a-roaring at you like an express train. And I'm proud to tell you that after Bill Monroe, we was the second group to ever try to pick and sing this kind of music. And the fellow that helped us shape it that way, Pee Wee Lambert. Now, back when we all first started out, back in 1946, we was kindly in the old-time hillbilly music thing. First couple of records we ever had out, that's what they was, old-time hillbilly music. But we'd listen to Bill Monroe on Saturday nights when he'd be on the Grand Ole Opry from Nashville, Tennessee. And maybe if Bill had him a new song, maybe one we'd never heard him do before, we'd all gang around the radio extra close and take notes, and after Bill's program would go off the air, we'd huddle around and compare notes and piece it together. And well, come Monday at noontime, when it was time for our Farm and Fun Time show there in Bristol, well, Bill Monroe's new song from Saturday night would be a new song on our program. And we got real excited when we heard Bill do this one song about this famous horse race. Took place out in Louisville, Kentucky. Must have been about 100 years ago. And they named the song after the two horses in the race, Molly and Timber. And you should have heard the way Bill done it on the opera. Had Earl Scruggs doing that fancy banjo picking, and Bill Monroe was chording the mandolin and singing Sky High and Clear. And well, we got so excited about it, we wanted to go in the studio and make us a record of it. And it was kind of a group thing. We had all the boys picking on it, but we took Pee Wee and put him out front and center. Had him playing the mandolin and singing Sky High and Clear, just like Bill Monroe. Now, we didn't know if Bill would like it or not. As soon as the record come out and folks got to hearing it on the radio, why, ooh-wee. Well, you know, it used to be, if you heard a hillbilly record on the radio, you knew within the first 2 or 3 notes whether it was going to be a Roy A. Cuff or an Ernest Tubb. They all had a style, something unique that would make folks want to come out and see the program in different parts of the country. And Bill Monroe was no different. Bill Monroe had him a style. And when he heard us doing that song, the way that he done it, oh, he wasn't pleased a bit. Oh, it got so whenever anybody would mention the Stanley brothers around Bill Monroe, he saw red. But it didn't last long, and we patched things up with him. And well, in fact, I even went to work for him. I surely did. Things was kind of slow for our group at the time. And Uncle Sam kept calling on members of our group to go overseas and shoot bullets at people. So we took some time off, and Well, we did. I went to work for Bill, stayed with him 3 or 4 months, traveled all over the country, helped him make the records, played on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry with him. Made me real proud when Bill Monroe would mention my name on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. Now, we'd like to call up one of the Bluegrass boys to help me do a little number here. One of the finest fellows to ever stand beside me on the stage and hold a guitar. And a fellow that has one of the best natural lead voices that I've ever heard in my life. Of course, I'm talking about Mr. Carter Stanley. Carter, you get up here now and help me do this little number. One that we just have recorded called The Sugar-Coated Love. Bill Monroe called my name on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. Oh, you couldn't ask for a better friend than Bill Monroe. I couldn't ask for a better friend than Pee Wee Lambert. Old Pee Wee stayed with us 4 or 5 years. Helped us get going in that bluegrass direction, helped us make the records. And after we'd had 2 or 3 of them to come out, we wanted to come up with a sound of our own. Well, you know, something I still like Bill's music, but something we could put our own spin on. We've done it with our trio singing. Used to be if a group of hillbillies wanted to sing them a trio, they'd all gang around the microphone and one of the boys, usually the guitar player, well, he would sing the lead, the melody, just put it out right smack dab in the middle. Another boy would add a harmony up above it, the tenor, and well, the last piece was a harmony underneath of all of it, baritone, lead, tenor, and baritone. That was your standard trio. Well, we wanted to shake it up a little bit. Oh, we still put the lead and the tenor out there, but instead of leaving the baritone buried way underneath there, we yanked it out and stuck it way up on top, made a whole new part out of it. Because it was pitched so high and clear, we called it a high baritone. And the perfect person to sing it, Pee Wee Lambert. And you should have heard some of the records we done that way. The Lonesome River, The Fields Have Turned Brown, The White Dove. That was the sound. But we didn't get rich off of it, and neither did Pee Wee. After he had 2 or 3 youngins to come along, well, he needed to make him an honest living. But I loved that boy. And about any time we'd be up in his part of the country where he and his family settled down, we'd stop in for a visit, catch up on old times and swap stories. Pee Wee passed away not long ago. 40-year-old heart attack. So early on, you know, he was more than just my singing partner. Oh, he's my drinking buddy. Oh, his wife Hazel used to get after him. She'd say, "How do you boys stand to hold your beer like that?" I told her, "Hazel, we don't hold it, we drink it." Pee Wee's dead. Hazel was going through his wallet not long after Pee Wee passed away. Little scraps of paper and one thing and another. And she come across this one piece of paper that was folded up that well, the old 78 records we used to have years ago, the big round disc had one song on one side and one song on the other, and right smack in the middle of them, they would have this paper label stuck on, would give the name of the song and who was singing it. And well, somehow or another, Pee Wee had took one of these old 78 records and worked the label off of it and folded it up and carried it in his wallet all those years. Hazel opened it up, and it was the label off of that first bluegrass record we ever made. The one where we had Pee Wee out front and center on it, the Molly and Tenbrook. The music meant something. Pee-wee meant something to me. A good friend, Dr. Mongol, came and paid us a visit not long ago. Stayed with us 3 or 4 days, and while he was there, he gave me a little checkup. A good going over. When he was done, he told me said if I didn't make some changes, I think he was talking about me and Dewey's finest. Talking about my drinking. Said if I didn't make some changes, I wouldn't be around to see another Christmas. I told him just like I told you folks a while ago, there ain't nobody or no thing that's the better of Carter Stanley. I told him, I said, I'll be around a long time after you cross the river, Doc. Pee-wee's dead. And what did he leave behind? The songs, the music. Makes me think about our music. My music. You know, we took it to 42 different states, 7 foreign countries. Wrote over 150 songs. Made over 300 recordings. And had one of them in the top 20. But it's been a hell of a ride for a country boy from the hills, from the Clinch Mountains of Virginia and around the world, and back home again. Will you miss me? Will you miss me? Will you miss me? Will you miss me when I'm gone? Thank you, folks. I usually minutes for if anybody has any questions about Carter Stanley or the Stanley Brothers or bluegrass or the latest tariffs that have gone into effect. I don't know if we can hear you very well, but if anybody has any questions about the music or Carter.
Got one right there.
Yes.
I was just curious, when Pee-wee died compared to Carter?
Pee-wee died in 1965, and Carter died a year later.
Okay.
So they were just a year apart. Pee-wee had a heart attack, and Carter's problem was Dewey's finest. Well, I appreciate you all hanging with me this afternoon.
Great.
They tell me that a performance without an audience is just a rehearsal, so thank you all for making this a show.
All right.
Thank you, Gary. One more time for the legendary Gary Reed. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for all that wonderful knowledge that you all have imparted right here. I hope you folks enjoyed that. It's a little something different this year, but give Gary another nice hand. All the way from Roanoke, Virginia, one of the finest, one of the most knowledgeable men on the grounds to ever know anything about Carter and Ralph the Stanley Brothers. And coming up next, we want to remind you to stay tuned for the Kevin Prater Band. Authentic Unlimited is going to close it tonight for us.